The sleek black Ducati motorcycle purred to a stop in the alleyway behind the McDonald's on Sunset Boulevard. Its rider, dressed in worn jeans and a faded hoodie, removed his helmet and ran a hand through his disheveled hair. Few would recognize Keanu Reeves in this state. The stubble on his face had grown into a patchy beard, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. This was precisely the point. 3 weeks, he muttered to himself as he secured his helmet to the bike. Just 3 more weeks. The acclaimed actor was in the final stages of researching a role that had captured his imagination like few others in his storied career. In Invisible Man, a gritty drama about homelessness in America, Keanu would play William, a former tech executive who loses everything after a mental health crisis. Director Ava DuVernay had suggested he spend time experiencing life on the streets, and Keanu, ever committed to authenticity, had embraced the challenge with his characteristic intensity. For nearly 2 months, he had been living a double life. By day, he was a homeless man named Bill, wandering the streets of Los Angeles, sleeping in shelters, and experiencing firsthand the invisibility that comes with extreme poverty. By night, he would return to his home, document his experiences, and prepare for the next day's immersion. Today marked day 43 of his experiment, and he had chosen the McDonald's on Sunset for his afternoon ritual, a small coffee, and whatever he could afford with the money he had collected that morning. What Keanu didn't know was that this ordinary Tuesday would become anything but ordinary, and that his encounter with regional manager Eliza Chen would change both their lives forever. The McDonald's on Sunset Boulevard hummed with the familiar sounds of midday commerce. Cash registers chimed, ice machines rumbled, and the deep fryers sizzled as they transformed potatoes into America's favorite side dish. The red and yellow interior gleamed under fluorescent lights, a temple of fast food efficiency. Eliza Chen surveyed the restaurant with sharp eyes, mentally checking items off her inspection list. As regional manager overseeing 12 locations across Los Angeles, she had developed a reputation for ruthless perfectionism. At 34, she was the youngest regional manager in Southern California, with ambitious plans to reach corporate headquarters before 40. The front counter display is still showing those discontinued items, she noted, her voice crisp as she addressed the store manager. And the drive-through times are averaging 47 seconds. That's 7 seconds over target. The manager, a harried man named Dave, nodded quickly. We'll fix it right away. We've been short-staffed since. I don't need explanations, Dave. I need solutions. Eliza cut him off, checking another item on her tablet. Corporate is watching this location closely. The numbers need to improve before my next visit. As she turned to inspect the dining area, the front door swung open, letting in a blast of warm air and a disheveled man who looked like he hadn't showered in days. Eliza's lips tightened into a thin line. The homelessness crisis in Los Angeles had been growing worse each year, and while McDonald's corporate policy allowed anyone to use their facilities if they purchased something, Eliza had always found the presence of homeless individuals disruptive to the dining experience she wanted to create. The man shuffled toward the counter, counting coins in his palm. He kept his head down, his long hair falling forward to obscure his face. Something about his movements seemed deliberate, almost studied, but Eliza dismissed the thought as she watched him approach Jessica, the cashier. "Small coffee, please," the man said, his voice surprisingly clear and well-modulated for someone in his apparent condition. Jessica smiled warmly. "That'll be $1.29. The man carefully counted out his coins, placing them one by one on the counter. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I think I'm short." Before Jessica could respond, Eliza stepped forward. "Sir, if you can't afford to make a purchase, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." The man looked up, and for a brief moment, Eliza felt a strange sense of recognition. His eyes were intelligent and penetrating, at odds with his disheveled appearance. But the moment passed, and all she saw was another homeless person disrupting her carefully managed restaurant. "I'm just a few cents short," he explained calmly. "I can wait outside until someone might spare some change." "That would be loitering," Eliza replied firmly. "Our policy is clear." Jessica glanced uncomfortably between them. "It's just 30 cents, Miss Chen. I could cover it myself." "That's not the point, Jessica," Eliza said. "We can't make exceptions." The man gathered his coins back into his palm. It's all right, I understand. He spoke with a dignity that momentarily disarmed Eliza, making her question her approach for a split second before she reasserted her professional demeanor. As he turned to leave, an elderly woman in line behind him stepped forward. I'll pay for his coffee, she announced, and a sandwich too. She looked directly at Eliza, challenge in her roomy eyes. That's allowed, isn't it? Eliza forced a professional smile. Of course, ma'am. The homeless man turned back, genuine gratitude on his face. Thank you, that's very kind. It's nothing, dear, the woman replied. My Henry was a veteran, ended up on the streets for a while after Vietnam. Someone helped him, so I help when I can. The man accepted the coffee and sandwich with a nod of thanks and took a seat at a corner table. Eliza watched him for a moment, noticing how he sat with surprisingly good posture, his movements economical and thoughtful as he arranged his meager meal. Again, something seemed off about him, but she pushed the thought aside and returned to her inspection. Keanu observed the restaurant as he sipped his coffee. This was the method that had served him well throughout his career: total immersion, keen observation, becoming the character from the inside out. He had always been drawn to roles that explored the human condition, and William's story had resonated deeply with him. He watched as the manager, Eliza, he had heard someone call her, moved through the restaurant with brisk efficiency. There was something almost mechanical about her movements, a person who had built walls around herself so high that little humanity seeped through, perfect for his research. William's story was not just about homelessness, but about the invisible barriers between people, the ways society allowed itself to stop seeing those who had fallen through the cracks. Keanu took out a small, battered notebook and made a few discreet notes. His director would appreciate the authenticity of this encounter. The reflexive dismissal, the bureaucratic adherence to policy, the momentary flash of doubt quickly suppressed. This was exactly why he had insisted on this immersive approach. The elderly woman who had purchased his meal caught his eye and smiled. He nodded in thanks again, touched by her kindness. These moments of human connection amid the indifference were what kept people going, he had learned. In his weeks on the street, it was these small acts that had affected him most deeply. His thoughts were interrupted as a group of teenagers entered, rowdy and loud after school. They took the table beside his, and he could feel their sidelong glances, their whispered comments. This too was familiar. The way people talked about the homeless as if they couldn't hear, as if they weren't fully present. Dude, he reeks, one boy said, not bothering to lower his voice. Don't look at him, a girl whispered. My mom says some of them are dangerous. Keanu kept his head down, continuing his practiced invisibility. This was part of the experience too, being reduced to an object of fear or disgust, no longer seen as an individual with a story, a past, a future. From across the room, he noticed Eliza watching the situation, clearly concerned about how his presence might affect her other customers. He saw her straighten her blazer and begin walking toward his table with determination. Excuse me, sir, Eliza said as she approached the homeless man's table. I'm going to have to ask you to finish your meal quickly. We have a 30-minute seating policy during peak hours. It was a lie. No such policy existed. But she had found that most homeless individuals wouldn't challenge authority figures. To her surprise, the man looked up at her with perfect composure. Is that policy posted somewhere? He asked mildly. I don't recall seeing it. Eliza faltered for a moment. It's an internal policy. We're experiencing high customer volume right now. He glanced around the half-empty restaurant with a small smile. I see. And does this policy apply to everyone, or just to people who look like me? The directness of his question caught her off guard. Most homeless people she had encountered either became belligerent or simply complied without question. This man's calm self-possession was unexpected. It applies to everyone during busy periods, she insisted. Interesting, he replied, because those teenagers just arrived after me and you haven't informed them of this policy. He took another sip of his coffee, his eyes never leaving hers. I wonder why that is. Eliza felt heat rise to her cheeks. Sir, I'm not going to debate this with you. It's my responsibility to ensure all customers have a positive dining experience. And my presence prevents that? He asked, his voice still gentle but with an undercurrent of steel. "What exactly about me do you find so disruptive, Eliza?" The use of her name startled her. She glanced down at her name tag, realizing he had simply read it, but something about his directness made her uncomfortable. "That's not what I meant," she said, her professional veneer cracking slightly. "But we have certain standards and—" "Standards," he repeated, nodding slowly. "I understand standards. I wonder, though, if your standards include treating all human beings with dignity, regardless of their circumstances." The teenagers at the next table had gone quiet, openly listening to the exchange. One of them was surreptitiously recording with his phone. Eliza became acutely aware that she was creating exactly the scene she had hoped to avoid. "Look," she said, lowering her voice, "I'm just doing my job. Nothing personal." The man's expression softened. "I know. That's often how it begins. Just doing our jobs, following policy, maintaining standards. But at what point do we question whether those policies reflect the values we want to embody?" There was something about his manner of speaking that continued to niggle at Eliza's mind, an articulateness, a thoughtfulness that seemed at odds with her preconceptions. For the first time, she really looked at him, not as a problem to be managed, but as a person. "Have we met before?" she asked suddenly. A flicker of something, amusement perhaps, crossed his face. "I don't believe so. I'm sure I would remember. You just seem familiar somehow," she persisted. He shrugged. "I have one of those faces, I guess." Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion at the front counter. A delivery driver was arguing with Jessica about an order that wasn't ready. Eliza sighed. "I need to handle this. Just please be on your way when you're finished eating." Her tone was less commanding now, almost apologetic. As she walked away, she could feel his eyes on her back, thoughtful and assessing. For reasons she couldn't articulate, it made her feel exposed, as if he could see beyond her professional facade to something she herself had forgotten was there. Over the next week, Keanu returned to the same McDonald's each day, continuing his character study. He observed Eliza from a distance, noting how differently she interacted with various customers, warm and solicitous with well-dressed patrons, efficient but cool with others, and barely concealing her discomfort with anyone who appeared homeless or destitute. On his fourth visit, he noticed that Jessica, the kind cashier, greeted him by name, or rather by the name he had given her, Bill. She would sometimes slip him an extra hash brown or ensure his coffee was freshly made. These small kindnesses were precisely what his character in the film would cling to, moments of human connection in a world that had otherwise rendered him invisible. Eliza, he noted, watched these interactions with a mixture of disapproval and curiosity. Once, he caught her observing him as he helped an elderly man clean up a spilled drink, handling the situation with efficiency before the staff could even respond. Her expression had been unreadable, but he sensed a crack in her armor. On the seventh day, as Los Angeles sweltered under an unseasonable heat wave, the restaurant was busier than usual, with people seeking air-conditioned refuge. Keanu took his usual corner table with his small coffee, watching the controlled chaos of the lunch rush. Eliza was everywhere at once, stepping in to work the register when lines grew too long, expediting orders, directing her staff with the precision of an orchestra conductor. Then he noticed a man enter who seemed out of place, not because of homelessness, but because of the intensity in his eyes, the rigid set of his shoulders. Something about him raised Keanu's alertness, an instinct honed through countless action roles and the stunt work that accompanied them. The man approached the counter, his hand inside his jacket pocket, and Keanu felt a surge of adrenaline. What happened next unfolded in seconds. The man pulled a gun from his pocket, pointing it at the terrified cashier and demanding money. Customers screamed and dropped to the ground. Eliza, emerging from the back office, froze at the sight of the weapon. Without conscious thought, Keanu moved. Years of filming action sequences had trained his body to respond instinctively to perceived threats. He approached from behind, his footsteps silent on the tile floor, and in one fluid motion he grasped the man's wrist, twisting it upward as he used his other arm to lock around the man's throat in a controlled hold. "Drop it," he said quietly, applying just enough pressure to make his point clear. "Nobody needs to get hurt today." The would-be robber, startled by the sudden intervention, tried to struggle. But Keanu had spent enough time with stunt coordinators to know exactly how to maintain control without causing injury. The gun clattered to the floor, and within moments, several employees had rushed forward to kick it out of reach. Eliza stood transfixed, watching as the disheveled homeless man she had tried to drive away single-handedly disarmed an armed robber with the skill of a trained professional. Their eyes met across the restaurant, and in that moment of shock and adrenaline, recognition finally dawned on her face. She began, but couldn't finish the sentence. Keanu released the subdued robber into the hands of two male employees who held him until police arrived. He straightened up, pushing his long hair back from his face, and for a moment the veil of Bill dropped, revealing the unmistakable features of one of Hollywood's most beloved actors. Keanu Reeves, he confirmed quietly, extending his hand. Though I've been going by Bill recently. The restaurant erupted in chaos as customers who had been hiding under tables realized what had happened. Phone cameras appeared from every direction, and the teenagers who had mocked him days earlier stared in open-mouthed shock. Eliza took his offered hand automatically, her mind struggling to reconcile the homeless man she had dismissed with the A-list actor now standing before her. "But why?" she managed to ask as police sirens wailed in the distance. "Research for a role," he explained simply. "I needed to understand what it feels like to be invisible." The next hours passed in a blur. Police arrived to arrest the would-be robber, customers and staff gave statements, and the story of Keanu Reeves' heroic intervention while undercover as a homeless man spread across social media with the speed only a celebrity story can achieve. Eliza found herself sitting across from Keanu in her office, the door closed against the continuing commotion outside. Her hands trembled slightly as she offered him a bottle of water, which he accepted with a small nod of thanks. "I don't know what to say," she began. "I treated you so... the way most people treat the homeless," he finished for her. That was the point of the exercise. She winced at his gentle but accurate assessment. "I've been horrible." "Not horrible," he corrected. "Just disconnected. It's easy to enforce policies without considering the humanity of the people they affect." Eliza looked down at her hands. "I've always been so focused on rules, on success, on climbing the corporate ladder. I never stopped to think about the people who fall through the cracks," he suggested. "Most don't. That's why I took this role. It's a story that needs telling." She looked up at him, curiosity overcoming her embarrassment. "What's the film about?" "It's called Invisible Man," Keanu explained, leaning forward slightly. "It follows William, a former tech executive who loses everything after a mental health crisis. His job, his home, his identity. The film explores how quickly someone can become invisible in our society and how difficult it is to become visible again once people have decided what category you belong in." "Like I did with you," Eliza acknowledged. He nodded. "The director wanted me to understand that experience firsthand, how it feels when people avoid eye contact, how conversations happen about you rather than with you, how quickly assumptions are made based on appearance." "And now you'll include me in the film as the heartless manager?" she asked, attempting a joke that fell flat. Keanu smiled gently. "Actually, I was thinking your character might have a redemption arc." Her eyebrows rose in surprise. "My character?" "Well, a character inspired by you," he clarified. "Someone who begins by seeing policies rather than people, but who has the capacity to change when confronted with the consequences of that perspective." Eliza was silent for a moment, absorbing his words. "Do you really think people can change that fundamentally?" "I do," he said simply. "I've witnessed it throughout my career, in characters I've played and people I've met. Transformation is always possible when we're willing to see ourselves clearly." Before she could respond, there was a knock at the door. Dave, the store manager, poked his head in. "Miss Chen, the media is outside. Corporate is calling non-stop. They want to know how to handle this." Eliza took a deep breath. "Tell them I'll call back in 10 minutes. After Dave closed the door, she turned back to Keanu. "Corporate will want to capitalize on this. Free publicity, a feel-good story about their heroic customer. They'll never mention how we treat homeless people every day." Keanu studied her face. "What would you like to happen instead?" She considered for a moment. "I'd like to actually make a difference. Not just a PR statement, but real change. He smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. That sounds like the beginning of a redemption arc to me. 3 months later, Eliza Chen stood nervously backstage at the Los Angeles Convention Center. The Homes for Hope Gala was the largest homeless advocacy fundraiser of the year, and somehow she had found herself invited to speak. After the incident at McDonald's, her life had taken an unexpected turn. The viral story of Keanu Reeves going undercover as a homeless man had indeed attracted corporate attention, but not in the way she had anticipated. Rather than simply using it as a publicity opportunity, she had found herself proposing a company-wide initiative to make McDonald's locations more accessible and supportive for homeless individuals. To her surprise, the idea had resonated with some key executives. A pilot program had been launched in Los Angeles, McHaven, which designated certain locations as safe spaces where homeless individuals could access basic necessities: clean water, restrooms, charging stations for phones, often their only connection to potential employers or social services, and affordable meal options. The program also partnered with local shelters and social service organizations to provide information and resources. It wasn't a solution to homelessness, but it was a step toward treating those experiencing it with dignity. Eliza smoothed down her dress and peered out at the audience. Celebrities, politicians, and business leaders filled the tables, checkbooks ready for the evening's fundraising appeals. And there, at a front table, sat Keanu Reeves, now clean-shaven and elegantly dressed for the premiere of Invisible Man that would follow the gala. Their paths had crossed several times during the development of the McHaven program. Keanu had connected her with homelessness experts and advocates, lending his support without seeking credit. He had also invited her to visit the film set, where she had watched him transform into William, the character he had researched so thoroughly. "Miss Chen, you're on in 2 minutes," an event coordinator informed her. Eliza nodded, her heart pounding. Public speaking had never been her forte. She was more comfortable with spreadsheets and efficiency metrics than sharing personal revelations. But some stories needed telling. As she was introduced and walked onto the stage, the spotlight momentarily blinded her. She placed her notes on the podium, took a deep breath, and began. "6 months ago, if you had told me I would be standing here tonight, I would have thought you were crazy. My life was spreadsheets, quarterly profits, and corporate advancement. I managed people the way I managed inventory, as resources to be optimized." She paused, looking out at the attentive faces. "Then I met a homeless man named Bill." As she recounted her story, her dismissal of Bill, the armed robbery, the shocking revelation of his identity, and most importantly, her own journey of recognition, she watched the audience's reactions. Some nodded in recognition of their own biases, others shifted uncomfortably. "What I learned from Keanu, though he would be too modest to put it this way, is that true vision isn't about seeing what's in front of you. It's about seeing what you've trained yourself not to see." She looked directly at him as she said this, and he gave a small nod of acknowledgement. The McHaven program isn't a solution to homelessness. We need affordable housing, mental health services, addiction treatment, and systemic change for that. But it is a step toward seeing people who have become invisible, toward recognizing their humanity and dignity. She concluded with the announcement that McDonald's was expanding the program to 50 locations across California, with plans for national implementation if the results continued to be positive. The applause was enthusiastic, and as she left the stage, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. This wasn't the career advancement she had once dreamed of, but somehow it felt more significant. Later that evening, at the premiere of Invisible Man, Eliza sat in the darkened theater, watching Keanu's transformation into William with a lump in her throat. The film was raw and unflinching, showing the casual cruelty, institutional indifference, and social invisibility experienced by those without homes. When William encountered a fast food manager character, one who bore more than a passing resemblance to her former self, Eliza felt tears prick at her eyes. The character's journey from rigid enforcement of rules to recognition of humanity paralleled her own so closely that it was almost uncomfortable to watch. As the credits rolled and the audience rose in a standing ovation, she remained seated, absorbing the experience. Keanu had delivered one of the most powerful performances of his career, disappearing so completely into William that even knowing his process, she could barely glimpse the actor beneath the character. At the after-party, surrounded by Hollywood elite, Eliza felt out of place until Keanu approached, 2 glasses of sparkling water in hand. "What did you think?" he asked, offering her one of the glasses. It was, she searched for words, transformative, for the audience and apparently for you too. He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Some roles change you. You can't spend weeks experiencing even a simulation of homelessness without it affecting your perspective." "The character of Marion," she said, referring to the manager in the film, "she was inspired by several people," he said diplomatically, "though your story helped shape her journey." Eliza smiled. Her redemption arc was quite compelling. "As is yours," he replied. "The McCaven program is making a real difference. I've heard from several people in the homeless community who have benefited from it." She took a sip of her water. "It's just the beginning. I'm actually leaving McDonald's next month." His eyebrows rose in surprise. "Oh?" "I've accepted a position with the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority," she explained. "They wanted someone with corporate experience to help build partnerships with businesses. Apparently, my unique perspective is valuable." Keanu's smile was genuine. "That's excellent news. It's a pay cut," she admitted, "and I'll be starting at the bottom again. But for the first time in years, I feel like I'm doing something that matters." He raised his glass in a small toast. "To new beginnings." As they clinked glasses, the flash of cameras caught their interaction. The movie star and the former McDonald's manager, whose lives had intersected in the most unlikely way. Tomorrow, the photos would appear in entertainment news, most focusing on Keanu's latest success rather than the deeper story behind it. But for Eliza Chen, who had learned to see beyond surfaces, and for Keanu Reeves, who had made a career of seeking authenticity in an industry built on illusion, the moment held a significance that transcended headlines. "You know," Keanu said thoughtfully, "the film is called Invisible Man, but it's really about becoming visible again, not just to others, but to yourself." Eliza nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. 6 months ago, she had been as invisible as the homeless people she had tried to remove from her restaurant, hidden behind policies, ambition, and the comfortable numbness of indifference. Now she saw clearly. "Thank you," she said simply, "for helping me see." His response was characteristic in its humility and wisdom. "We help each other see. That's the point of it all, isn't it?" As the party continued around them, their conversation turned to future projects, his next film, her ideas for expanding homeless services, the continuing work of recognizing humanity in unexpected places. Two people from vastly different worlds, connected by a chance encounter that had revealed the invisible threads binding all human experience. And somewhere on the streets of Los Angeles, countless invisible people continued their daily struggle for survival and dignity, waiting for the rest of the world to truly see them. The story of Keanu Reeves going undercover as a homeless man in McDonald's went viral across social media platforms, with headlines proclaiming Keanu's secret heroism and Hollywood star exposes homeless treatment. The incident spawned thousands of conversations about homelessness, celebrity, and social responsibility. What few people realized, however, was that the true significance of the event lay not in the dramatic moment of heroism or the revelation of a movie star's identity, but in the quiet transformation of one woman's perspective, a transformation that would ultimately affect thousands of lives through the McCaven program and her subsequent work with homeless services. For Keanu Reeves, it became another chapter in a career defined by authenticity and humility. Invisible Man would earn him critical acclaim and awards consideration, but he would maintain that the real value of the project lay in the awareness it raised about homelessness in America. For Eliza Chen, it marked the beginning of a journey from corporate ambition to social impact, from enforcing policies to changing them, from climbing a ladder to building a bridge. And for those who heard their story, through the film, through news reports, through the expansion of programs like McCaven, It offered a glimpse of what becomes possible when we choose to see each other completely, beyond labels and circumstances, in the fullness of our shared humanity. In a world increasingly defined by division, it was a reminder that transformation begins with a single moment of true seeing, and that such moments can occur in the most unexpected places, even in a McDonald's on Sunset Boulevard. The end.